What's up, America, and welcome back to America's Kitchen Table. I want to welcome you whether you are joining on the Facebook page, America's Kitchen Table, or right here on YouTube on the America's Kitchen Table YouTube page. I really want to personally welcome you here and say I really appreciate you watching this video. So this is week 2 of my soft quarantine experiment during this coronavirus outbreak. And we did some good things, we did some bad things, and we ramped up in some other areas as well. And I also want to talk to you about the psychology of SHTF and the psychology of what I think is about to happen here in the next couple of weeks. So keep all that in mind. We have a lot to cover tonight, so let's get right down to it. The best thing that happened last week is I lost another 3-4 pounds, so that's great. It's definitely something like we talked about last week that I'm concentrating on this spring is getting in better physical condition and dropping some tonnage, as they say. So just staying at home, eating more healthy, eating whole foods, and not eating the processed crap or necessarily letting other people prepare my food. So I did eat out once this week. Quite frankly, I kind of, mentally broke. I just wanted something different, right? And that definitely plays in to a lot of what we're going to talk about later on here in the video. Now, the second thing is I had some extra rice and beans and needed to get them in buckets. And so I did a lot of that yesterday. I'm actually recording this video on St. Patrick's Day, 3/17. You're probably going to catch this on Wednesday morning. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that because of some other things that we're going to talk about. But I actually did get some more rice and beans in buckets and Mylar bags. And this is 4 3/4 pounds of rice in a Mylar bag. You can see it sucks it down real nice, and the oxygen absorbers pull all the oxygen out and basically vacuum seals it. So I had some extras, so I went ahead and bagged up some in gallon Mylar bags. But the problem is, and the problem I've ran into even with some 5-gallon bags that I have done this week is this is also a 4 3/4, well, this is 4.5 pounds of rice in a 1-gallon Mylar bag. And you can see it's not nearly as stiff. And honestly, the oxygen absorbers that I have in both these bags are way overkill. I actually got 1,000 cc's of oxygen absorbers in both these bags, and one has sucked down very nicely the way it should be, the way it's supposed to be, the way it's expected to be, and this one not so much. So I either have a Mylar bag with a pinhole in it or a bad oxygen absorber. I feel really confident in my iron seal on the top of the bag, so I definitely think it's one of the two, whether it's a bad bag or a bad oxygen sensor. So oxygen absorber, I should say. So I'm probably going to retest that before I go to bed, because with that much oxygen absorbers in it, it should suck down in a couple of hours in that small of a bag. So we'll see in the morning, I guess. So that's always something to be aware of when you're doing long-term storage for food, and especially if you're waiting super late into the game and you feel a little rushed, that if mistakes like that come up, that it's going to hinder your performance in the future. Granted, I'm not going to rely on that 4.5 pounds of rice that I put in a bag today, because I have other things, and I am fairly prepared. And I know there's lots of people out there, myself included, here in the last couple of weeks, seeing this train come down the tracks that is the coronavirus, that you really start to question your preps. You really start to see the holes in your game plan, and you spend more time thinking about what you don't have instead of what you do have. I know that I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and I had put a percentage on how ready I thought I was just for general everyday preparation. And they were shocked by the percentage that I gave them. And they didn't let me finish the entire statement. The reason that the percentage was so low is because I've game planned this out. I've asked myself the what ifs. I have followed enough stories and followed enough great people that have taught me so much that I know what I need. So it's not that I'm unprepared, it's that I know what I need. So I could definitely hold out for quite a while, a long time actually, but it's not necessarily where I want to be. And I think that's a very natural place to be. And it's a very natural reaction to where when you see things coming down the tracks that you're like, oh, I need this, I need that, I need to do better at this, and I need to do better at that. But if it's game time, it's game time. And we're just going to have to roll with what we got. And thankfully, I have done this a little bit. And I'm definitely better off than your normal denier walking down the street. And that's one of the next things that I want to talk about is we're probably going to get some type of national quarantine or some type of national lockdown, whatever you want to call it, shelter in place, whatever name you want to put on it to make yourself feel better, it's absolutely fine. There's no judgments here. And the reason that I say that, and how we can discern all of the information out there and really make a judgment on that, because when people hear that, they're like, Needham, you're crazy. We're not going into a national lockdown. Well, let me pose these questions to you. What has every other country done? They've gone into a lockdown. We can say what we want to say about the totalitarian regime that's China, but they did the right thing by locking it down. They got it, not necessarily ahead of it, but they nipped it in the bud as much as they could because they were scared to death of it. And that's why they took the precautions that they did. We see Italy, they're in major lockdown. And Italy was a little bit behind. They didn't see it necessarily coming and didn't take it seriously enough on the front end. So they kind of just, did a little shelter in place, then they locked down the northern half of the country, and then basically 72 to 96 hours later, they said, nope, this ain't going to work. We're locking down the entire country. We also see Spain in the same predicament. We see France in the same predicament. The Dutch are about to do the same thing. So every country that we've seen deal with this on a mass scale, they've gone into national quarantine. I fully believe that the coronavirus has told us two things. You can either have the coronavirus or your economy, but you can't have both. And that's a real hard question for lots of administrations and a hard concept for governmental agencies to get their heads wrapped around. And I think that's where we're headed to here in America, is that we've tried to save our economy as much as possible. No judgments there. I think the Trump administration has done an excellent job in many ways, and I think that they've made some mistakes in some ways too. And that's not a judgment on them. I think anybody in the world or any other administration would make the same mistakes. And we've seen that play out across the globe. But another big reason why I say that we're going to go into a national quarantine situation is we can see the progression on what's happened. Is that Friday, I think the CDC and the Trump administration had said no gatherings more than 500 for X number of days. And then Saturday, they cut it to 250. And then Sunday, they cut it to 50. And then Monday of this week, they cut it down to 10. And they asked nicely. It wasn't, mandated, or it wasn't, by force. But we've seen them incrementally, in a fairly quick fashion, knock down those numbers and really tighten that noose day by day by day. And I think the next logical step for that to happen is a national quarantine shelter in place. Now, we don't know what that's going to entail. We don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know how strict that is going to be. But I definitely think that that is definitely where we're headed, because we're seeing people that have positive tests, that they're being sent home to self-quarantine, and they're not. Spring breakers in Florida are going crazy. And so the president has asked nicely to limit your groups, have your social distance and arm distance, and we're simply not doing it. We're simply not heeding positive reinforcement, so to speak. We're not heeding the pretty please asking of the questions. So I think Daddy is about to rip off his belt and say, okay, you don't want to listen? Now you have to stay in your room and lock your door. And hopefully it doesn't come to that, but it's definitely the next logical step. And with that there's going to be lots of different emotions having to be dealt with. And I don't know if a lot of people are going to be able to cope with that. And I'm going to talk about this much more in tomorrow's video, because this one is getting around the 13-minute mark, 15-minute mark. So I definitely want to keep this short. But that's my observations on week 2 of soft quarantine. So I hope that you have found this encouraging, and I hope this has inspired you to take a little bit more action and ask yourself a little bit more of the what if questions on what is going on in the world. And hopefully it's inspired you to action, and in some small way been a blessing to you. And if it has, I want to encourage you and ask you to share this with your friends. Information is very, very important in situations like this, and just the general world that we live in. Because the more we can help others now, the more we can take solace that we helped others in the future. Guys, that's what I have for you tonight, and I want to thank you, and we'll see you again right here on America's Kitchen Table.